Let's talk about something we all feel but rarely name out loud: jealousy. Not our own, but when it shows up in someone else's eyes, words, or silence. You've felt it. That quiet tension in the rim. The passive aggressive compliment that doesn't quite land. The friend who starts to pull away just when you start to shine. Here's the truth most people don't say. Jealousy isn't always loud or obvious. It's subtle. It's a slow shift in behavior. And often it comes from people we least expect, people close to us, people we thought would clap the loudest when we finally won. But let me be clear, someone else's jealousy isn't your fault. And it's not your burden to carry. It's just a sign, a red flag waving quietly in the wind that someone is uncomfortable with your growth because it reminds them of their stagnation. You can love people and still notice they're not rooting for you. You can be kind and still protect your energy. And yes, you can keep rising even when others are hoping you'll fall. So how do we recognize jealousy when it hides behind a smile? How do we protect ourselves while still standing in our truth? Backhanded compliments are the kind of words that wear a smile but carry a sting. They're delivered with a tone that seems sweet, but something inside you twists. When you hear them, you know it's not quite right. You know it doesn't feel like support. It feels like a setup. It sounds like you look so good for someone your age, or I didn't expect you to pull that off, but good for you. It's wrapped in praise, but it's laced with doubt. These kinds of remarks are meant to keep you off balance. They're meant to make you question whether your success is legitimate or just luck. They're subtle ways of saying, you're doing well, but not better than me, or don't get too confident. It often comes from people who are uncomfortable with your growth, but still want to appear supportive. So instead of offering genuine congratulations, they serve you a compliment with a side of comparison or condescension. They don't want to look like the jealous friend, so they pretend to cheer while planting tiny seeds of insecurity in your mind. And the hardest part is, you can't always call it out. If you do, they'll say, you're being sensitive. They'll act surprised. They'll double down with, I was just joking. Or, wow, you can't even take a compliment? And suddenly, you're defending yourself for feeling something that was real in the first place. Backhanded compliments are never about you. They're about the other person's internal struggle, what they feel they lack when they look at you. Your joy reminds them of what they haven't pursued. Your confidence triggers the places in them still full of fear. So instead of celebrating you, they try to subtly shrink you. Not enough to push you away, just enough to keep you questioning. There's a moment when you share something big, something you've worked hard for, maybe even quietly dreamed about for years. You finally land the job, finish the degree, launch the business, make the move, or reach a milestone that means something deeply personal to you. And instead of the joy you expect from the people close to you, there's a strange shift in the air. You get a lukewarm, that's cool, or a distracted nod. Sometimes they change the subject within seconds, as if your moment doesn't deserve space. Minimizing isn't loud. It's not a confrontation. It's a dismissal. It's the silence after your good news. It's the lack of questions, the lack of interest, the way they downplay what took you months or years to accomplish. It sounds like, well, anyone could do that if they tried, or that kind of thing doesn't impress me much. And even though they say they're happy for you, their energy says otherwise. Sometimes they'll even try to reframe your success in a way that makes it feel smaller. They'll remind you of how lucky you were or how it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. Maybe they bring up their own story to compete with yours, making it clear they want to shift the spotlight back to themselves. Or worse, they offer backhanded reassurance like, don't let this go to your head, or we'll see how long that lasts. When people minimize your achievements, they're revealing their discomfort with your progress. Your growth unsettles them because it challenges the story they've built about their own life. Instead of using your success as inspiration, they use it as a mirror, and that reflection can be hard to face. So rather than confront their own inaction, they chip away at your confidence. Not in obvious ways, but in small, dismissive comments that add up over time. And it leaves you wondering if maybe you made too big a deal of something. It makes you second guess your excitement. It dims your light in moments when you were meant to shine. Because when people minimize you, they're not just shrinking your achievements. They're trying to shrink the space you take up in the world. Imitation is often called the sincerest form of flattery, but not when it's laced with envy and silence. You start to notice the little things at first, the way they begin using the same phrases you do, styling themselves in a way that mirrors your look, suddenly being interested in the things you've been passionate about for years. They start taking on pieces of your identity, like they're borrowing clothing, that they never ask, never acknowledge, never say, you inspired me. There's a difference between healthy influence and quiet copying. Influence is open, it's grateful, it's when someone says, I saw how you handle that and I learned from it. But jealousy doesn't work like that. It doesn't want to give credit. It wants to take the shine without admitting where it came from. So they watch you closely, sometimes even obsessively, and then they try to become a version of you, not because they admire you out loud, but because they want what you have without the vulnerability of saying so. What makes this especially complicated is that it often comes from people close to you, friends, colleagues, even family, people who have access to your life, your ideas, your energy. You share parts of yourself freely because that's who you are, open, creative, giving, and without warning, you see those pieces reflected back at you from someone who pretends they came up with it first. It can feel disorienting, confusing. You start to question whether you're imagining it. But it's real because it's not just one thing. It's the pattern, the way they subtly insert themselves into spaces you've carved out for yourself. In English, what they're really doing is trying to catch up to the version of you they couldn't become on their own. They see how you walk through the world with confidence, with authenticity, with your own rhythm. And instead of walking beside you, they try to replicate your steps. Not out of admiration, but out of a need to compete silently, out of a quiet resentment that they can't create what you do, so they'll settle for copying and hope no one notices. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel like support. It feels like satisfaction when you're going through something hard and the people you thought would check in on you don't. When your plans fall through, your progress slows down or your light dims for a moment, and instead of empathy, there's distance. Not the kind that respects your healing, but the kind that quietly enjoys your discomfort. It's not always obvious. Most of the time, they won't say anything cruel. They won't gloat out loud. They know how to play it cool. But there's a flicker in their eyes when they hear you're not doing well, a shift in their tone, a pause, just a little too long, maybe even a slight lift in their voice when they say, "Oh, really?" As if they've been waiting to hear that things aren't perfect for you. And in that moment, it becomes clear they were rooting for you. They were watching for you to fall. They may even dress it up as concern, asking questions that sound like care but feel like an intrusion. Well, they say things like, "Well, I figured something like that might happen," or "That's just life, you'll get used to it." Phrases that don't lift you up, they just confirm their own secret beliefs about your limits. It's their way of shrinking you without ever appearing unsupported. There's a kind of person who is uncomfortable with your success because it reflects what they haven't done. So when life humbles you, even for a moment, they feel a quiet sense of relief. They feel like things are back to balance, as if your struggle makes them feel safer in their stagnation, as if your pain makes their own inaction more justifiable. They celebrate internally because your setbacks give them the emotional permission to keep playing small. Your detour becomes their proof that your rise was temporary. And they may not say it, but deep down they hope it takes you a while to get back up. Not because you deserve to suffer, but because your shine challenged them. Your progress made them uncomfortable, and now that you're in a season of struggle, they don't have to feel so left behind. They won't clap for your comebacks, but they'll always make time for your breakdowns. They'll never repost your wins, but they'll whisper about your wounds. Because your low moments give them a sense of control, they don't have to do better if they believe you're not doing great either. There's something lonely about evolving, not because growth itself is isolating, but because the people you thought would grow with you don't always stay close when you begin to change. You start making different choices. Healthier ones, braver ones, more aligned with who you're becoming. And slowly, some people start pulling away. They stop calling as often, they stop showing up. The conversations that once flowed effortlessly now feel awkward and short. It's not that you've done something wrong. You haven't betrayed them or hurt them. You've simply outgrown the version of yourself they were comfortable with. The version that kept you small, predictable, easy to understand. And when you start shedding that skin, when you begin standing taller, speaking more confidently, pursuing things that once scared you, it disrupts the balance they counted on. See, your growth reflects something back to them. It shows them what's possible, but also highlights what they haven't chosen for themselves. And for some, that's hard to sit with. So instead of clapping for your transformation, they drift. They may not say anything directly. In fact, they might act like everything's fine when you do see them, but their energy tells the truth. You can feel the difference. You can sense the subtle withdrawal, the emotional distancing. And sometimes they justify it in their mind by saying you've changed, like that's a bad thing. And maybe you have changed. Maybe you've become more grounded, more intentional, more focused on your purpose. But what they really mean is that you've changed in a way that makes them uncomfortable. You've stepped into a space they don't recognize, and instead of getting curious about who you're becoming, they retreat into the version of you they miss. There's grief in that. The kind of grief that comes from watching someone choose not to meet you at the next level of your life. You wanted them there. You imagined they'd walk beside you just like they did before. But now your wins feel quieter around them. You filter your joy, you shrink your news, because deep down you know they're no longer clapping with a full heart. And what's most painful is realizing that your growth didn't push them away. Their resistance to their own growth did. Because real connection adapts, it evolves, it celebrates when you rise. But when someone is secretly rooted in competition, comparison, or fear, they won't lean in when you expand. They'll step back, hoping you'll shrink enough to fit back into the version of you they were comfortable loving. It's one of the most damaging ways jealousy can show itself when someone close to you, someone you trust, takes your story and twists it behind your back. Instead of lifting you up in conversations, they chip away at your character, your accomplishments, or your decisions. They don't have the courage to confront you directly. Instead, they'll whisper to others, weaving stories about you that are half-truths, misunderstandings, or downright fabrications. What's worse, these whispers are often framed as concern, as though they're simply worried about you, but underneath, there's an agenda, an attempt to undermine the foundation you've worked so hard to build. They start small with little digs disguised as friendly comments. Maybe they bring up something you've done, but only to question it. Are you sure that's the right move? I don't know if that's going to work out for her, though. She's always had trouble with that. Or, I heard she was struggling with that project. Maybe it's not her thing after all. These aren't just observations. They're subtle attacks meant to plant doubt in the minds of others, making you appear less competent, less capable, or even less trustworthy. And yet, they'll never confront you about it directly. They'll never challenge you face to face. It's all about creating an image of you that others question while maintaining a facade of innocence themselves. The gossip often feels like an afterthought to them, a passing comment, a lighthearted conversation, but it's the cumulative effect that hurts. These little undermining remarks start to add up, and soon people who once believed in your abilities begin to doubt you. They might even start treating you differently, as if your confidence is misplaced or your achievements aren't as impressive as they once seemed. And all the while, the person behind it all acts like they've done nothing wrong. They'll act concerned when your name comes up, but their words are far from supportive. What makes this type of jealousy so dangerous is that it's insidious. It's not overt hostility. It's not a loud attack on your character. Instead, it's quiet, behind-the-scenes manipulation that works over time to erode your confidence and relationships. They'll act like they have your best interests at heart, but their actions tell a different story. And often you won't even know it's happening until the damage has already been done. And then there's the way they position themselves as the better friend or the better colleague, despite never offering you the support you need. When you achieve something great, they may come around, but it's only to point out the parts that didn't go perfectly. Oh, I heard you almost messed up that presentation, right? Or they'll be the first to highlight the one thing that didn't go right in your big moment. They've learned that undermining you in small ways keeps them in the shadows,